I went in a couple of weeks ago and just asked ChatGPT, what are the top 5 reasons why businesses don't use the LLM like ChatGPT correctly? 85, 90%, whatever the number is of AI implementations don't work, right? So I'm like, hey, why? A couple of things that came out that you just talked about there. Fragmented, siloed data, right? If you don't have the right data feeding the machine, right, then like the best AI tool, the best CRM out there that has all the AI components, if it doesn't have the right information being fed into it, doesn't matter. Just doesn't matter, right? They talked about not well-defined use cases. So in other words, what do we really want this tool to use? And that's one of the biggest things with AI right now is the hype. It's just like, I need it. So I know you've been asked by the board. I'm sure you have. What's your AI strategy, David? Right? And you probably turned around and appropriately asked your CMO, your CRO, hey, what's our AI strategy? Because we better have one without saying, what do we need to do and how can AI help us? We're kind of the cart leading the horse, right?
Yeah. Let me share a little bit about that. First, as a guy who's been in CRM for 30 years, there's been this promise of CRM, right? That sellers will get more value out than they put into it. And I don't think we still are yet to crack that code. One of my engineers said to me a while ago, structured data is the language of business and unstructured data is the language of relationships. Again, AI presents enormous promise of us helping understand the language of relationship, unstructured data fundamentally. But I think we take technologies that we use in our personal lives and we think we're going to apply them to our business lives. And this ask me anything kind of metaphor, I don't believe is the right strategy for AI within business. I think it's got to be highly context driven. And that context is business process, the data, the content that really helps guide these LLMs to meaningfully support, in our case, sellers in their sales processes. I think I said to you on the pre-call, Steve, that I joke about the ABCs of intelligence, right? There's artificial intelligence. Everyone's talking about AI. There's business intelligence. A decade ago, everyone was talking about BI, and they're still talking about analytics and insights that are driven by BI. I talk a lot about CI, which is contextual intelligence. And if we can take AI and BI and put it in the context of a sales process, in the context of a sales methodology, in the context of what we know about a customer, we can have a huge impact using those technologies. But absent that, an ask me anything kind of approach without putting the work in to provide these LLMs with the context they need to be helpful is probably more distracting or more of a science experiment than it is a real business, a valuable business tool.
Here's what's so interesting about this. I'm sure when you were at Accenture, the whole big wave was digital transformation. Like the difference between the business of today and the business of tomorrow is data, right? And how we digitize and utilize that data and put the data into the hands of the teams, right? The execution, high performance teams. Well, here we are, how many decades later? And now we're still talking about the same issue, right? And AI has put a whole new level on. I mean, nobody talked about digital transformation the way we're talking about AI, right? It was going to change the world, but not at the level of AI, right? So when are we going to learn? Like, what are the fundamentals? What are the building blocks that you've learned from being a partner at Accenture, three-time B2B CEO about digital transformation, AI, the importance of data, the importance of customers? Like, what's the foundation? What's the lessons that we need to learn here that really get us to that contextual intelligence? Like, what do we need to do that we're not doing today?
I think actually we always learn a lesson. These cycles, in my experience, follow a similar pattern, right? If I go back to the very early days of CRM, people are like, we're going to install CRM and sales are going to get better immediately, right? And then out of the gate, some of these projects didn't go very well. I remember one of my clients in the early days said they were probably 3 or 4 years into the CRM cycle. And they said, we're going to approach this differently. We're going to spend a whole bunch of time before we ever show, back then it was Siebel, a Siebel screen. We're going to go and we're going to inform everyone on what a good sales process looks like, what good entrance and exit criteria look like, how we actually drive solution selling for their business. They spent a bunch of time working on that before they ever turned on the Siebel screens. And they were way more successful than the people who took a different approach years earlier. You look at the internet, I lived through the dot-com bubble, as many of us did. Same sort of thing. The hype got ahead of the execution. Stocks. I remember the former CEO of Accenture went to go start a company called Webvan, and they were going to go deliver groceries. The idea was right. And many of us have groceries delivered to our front porch today. It's done in a different way with different companies who actually figured out some of the prerequisites required to make that work. And today, I think with AI, it's the same thing. I think people are learning. I think you're going to see the technology, the processing power is what makes all this possible. Data centers and chips, and that's what makes all this possible. And I think we'll see, just like every other time, we'll see the business practices catch up, the context catch up with the technology. And I'm super optimistic about lots of things, but we'll see that happen again here over the next few years as businesses figure out how to leverage the power of AI.